Hello there, I'm Elio, and I'd like to introduce you to a new show that I'm creating. This show is about bead sprites, and this first episode is going to focus on talking about the basics of it and introducing you to what people do with them and the companies that are behind the hobby. Future episodes will focus on technique, such as assembly, some ironing, how to design them in art programs. Things can get really complicated, but let's focus on the basics. First though, I would like to talk about what got me into the hobby. So for me, video games are a big part of my life. I've played them since I was a kid, as I imagine most of you have, and I've been really into, say, The Legend of Zelda, Mega Man, etc., etc. They've influenced my life a lot. A few years back, I was working at a bead warehouse, and it was at this time that I learned about Perler Beads. And I learned that people were using them to recreate images of video game characters and so forth online. I've always been a bit ambitious, so I, of course, jumped in way over my head and tried to make a really big piece. That piece was actually the opening scene from A Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. It's the really big scene with the castle and, the title sequence. There were a lot of complicated techniques I didn't know about at the time, and so while I managed to get something resembling my goal, I really ended up wrecking the piece. I still have it today as a reminder of my early times, but from that I learned a lot of important skills that I hope to pass on to you, which is ultimately what this show is about. In this show, I want to pass on to you some really fundamental techniques that I've picked up on that I hope will save people a lot of time and money so they don't go and wreck a masterpiece like I did. Those techniques will cover things like how to assemble a piece, how to plan it out digitally, and how to iron it properly so that way it doesn't melt on you. Before I get into all that, let me just be clear about what exactly bead spriting is, so there's absolutely no confusion. Bead spriting is the recreation of retro-style art, usually from video games. This is specifically done using fusible plastic beads, often seen from Perler. This art form can take a few different forms. There are 2D sprites that are usually just a simple recreation. They might be magnetized or affixed to a wall. I've even seen them glued to laptops. 3D versions often come as toys. I've seen Minecraft figures or sometimes a sprite propped up on its side. Really ambitious stuff involves making things like a treasure chest or something to store coins in. But the one that I specialize in is 2.5D. In my case, I tend to make framed sprites that are layered on top of each other to give a semi-three-dimensional appearance to them. I do intend to teach the process behind making those, but that will take place over several episodes, and right now I'm focusing on the basics of the art form. So at this point, you might be wondering who makes these beads and where can you get them? That's understandable. Let's talk about the three major companies behind this, though there are other companies that make them. Specifically, I'm going to focus on Perler Beads, Hama Beads, and Artkal. Perler Beads are the default. A lot of people know them by name. They're a good staple to go with, but they are not without their limitations. Let me talk about their pros first. They're an American-made company with a good product. The product fuses well together and is really easy to assemble. They make both 5mm and 2.5mm versions of their bead. They're made of a hard plastic that is durable and once set will not bend easily. This is ideal for making three-dimensional pieces that you plan to have standing up. They also recently expanded their color palette, which I was very pleased to find out about. That being said, there are still limitations in their palette that make more ambitious projects difficult to accomplish. In light of that, it caused me to look for other companies that had a bigger color selection. This led me to the next company, Hama Beads. Hama beads are very similar to Perler. They make hard plastic beads just like Perler that fuse well together and retain their shape well. They also mesh well with Perler beads when you fuse them together. This is fantastic because they can be used to flush out Perler's palette well. The big limitation for Hama Beads for me as a US citizen are that due to them being in England, I am not able to import them as frequently as I would like, and those imports take a long time to get to me. The pricing of their beads is comparable to Perler, but it uses British pounds. This leads to a higher cost of value as a US citizen, and that is before the shipping cost. Though to be fair, I have not dealt with their company in years. While their extended colors are great, I did find problems with many of their beads that I got. They were often cut at inconsistent lengths, which greatly annoyed me. In addition to that, during the fusing process, this leads to me trying to cut out beads while ironing, so that way I can replace them. Still, Hama have a few really good colors that I haven't been able to find anyplace else. Their dark brown, dark red, and olive green are three colors I haven't been able to find anyplace else, and I wish other companies would make. These three colors are ideal for blending the black to other parts of the spectrum. Even though I was happy with Hama Beads at the time, I ended up finding out about a third company, Artkal Beads. Artkal Beads is by far my favorite, and I should bring up at this point that they are not sponsoring me at all for this. Like Perler, they make 5mm beads, but also make 2.6mm beads. While that is slightly larger than Perler's 2.5, they mesh just fine. The big appeal, though, is that Artkal has a significantly larger color palette. The colors can also be combined with Perler just fine. Combining them with Hama Beads can cause complications, though. In addition, Artkal has hard and soft plastic beads. The hard plastic is nearly identical to Perler. The soft plastic beads are far more elastic. For my work, I prefer their elastic beads, which are the A series beads. They are a little easier to melt, and I personally like them better. I'll touch on that more in later videos. They also have some effect beads that I find really interesting, such as glow in the dark. I plan to play with those more later. They also have a lot of really useful accessories. Artkal caught my eye not just because of their colors, but because they really embrace this hobby. For example, they've added new colors based on what their customers want, and their products really seem to be geared with common issues that bead spiders have to deal with. That being said, they are not without their flaws. The biggest flaw I've had with them I've already sort of touched. It's that they lack specific dark colors that transition well into the rest of their palette from black. Because of this, when I'm dealing with their gradients and try to transition into black, it often feels like the colors skip a step. Besides that though, I've also had some minor issues communicating with them. This really isn't their fault, because I understand they're a Chinese company, and the transition from English to Mandarin and vice versa can be difficult. Still, sometimes I try to talk to them about very technical issues, and they don't seem to fully understand what I'm talking about, even when I give examples. That's a very, very minor complaint compared to the quality of goods they produce. And I have to say, again, it's completely outstanding. Another huge issue I have, though, are that import times take way too long. I understand I'm importing from China, however, it often takes 2 to 3 weeks to get my shipment from them. There is expedited shipping I can pay for, and that is offered for free if you pay $160. That sometimes is difficult to pull off. It has come up before that I'm waiting on a bead because of the wait time as well that I need for a commission or current project. And that's a major problem that's really difficult to ignore. Like I said earlier, there are other companies. However, these are the only 3 I've actually dealt with. With those 3 out of the way, I'd like to talk about a distributor I've encountered in the United States. This is Baker Kids Crafts. I've been using them for about 5 years to get the beads I need, and they have been fantastic. Though the stock sometimes dwindles, just being able to access both Hama and Artkal beads stateside helps with a lot of the shipping issues I've mentioned previously. Instead of waiting 2 to 3 weeks, I can usually get my shipment in a week. And the price of the beads are about the same. And also, Michelle, if you are watching this, this is a personal thank you for being my go-to bead girl. Now that I've covered the basics, let's look ahead to next episode. There I'm going to be building a Pikachu through a time lapse to allow you to see my techniques when actually crafting this sprite. I'll also be talking over it and giving some insights as I'm working on it. I hope that this video has given you some insight into this craft, as well as giving you some good information to start. Like I said earlier, future episodes will focus more on technique. This was just an introduction. And thank you for watching.